a.m. on Wednesday, February 1, 2023. We are meeting virtually via Zoom to convene a joint public roundtable on PR 25-0063, the compensation and working conditions agreement between the District of Columbia Public Schools and the Washington Teachers Union, Local 6 of the American Federation of Teachers Approval Resolution of 2023. This roundtable is streaming live and is being recorded on the committee's YouTube channel named EAL Committee. It is also available on the DC Council website. This resolution will approve a collective bargaining agreement between DC Public Schools and the Washington Teachers Union, which will be in effect from October 1, 2019 to September 30th, 2023. The agreement will cover more than 5,500 teachers, social workers, therapists, coaches, and other school personnel. This is a unique case because the majority of the time period covered by the agreement has passed. For that reason, the contract provides retroactive raises for FY 2020 and FY 2021 and FY 2022 for all Washington Teacher Union members. It also provides retention bonuses for all Washington Teacher Union members, additional bonuses for hard-to-fill positions, and stipends for employees with specialized duties, such as special education. The agreement also provides for increased optical, dental, and legal benefits, and includes provisions for working conditions such as class size. The contract is the result of an extensive negotiations process and represents a compromise agreement between the Washington Teachers Union and the district government, represented by the Office of Labor Relations and Collective Bargaining. It is also important to note that this agreement covers the time during which we were in the throes of COVID-19 pandemic from April 20th, 20 to August 2021. Our schools and teachers were faced with immense challenges during this period, and some of the challenges persist even today. That is why it is important that this agreement include retention bonuses for social workers, psychologists, special education teachers, math and science teachers, world language teachers, speech pathologists, occupational therapists, and physical therapists. It also includes stipends for special ed designees, local education agency representatives, and case managers. These bonuses and stipends, along with the other benefits in this contract, include the retroactive payments, reflect a commitment to recognize the hard work and dedication of our teachers through the public health crisis. Also, and maybe more critically, this contract ensures that our teachers and school system are supported and well-equipped to provide our youth with a meaningful and transformative education this school year. And I am proud that the terms of this agreement ensure that our teachers remain among the highest paid teachers in the nation. This will allow the district to remain competitive in our efforts to attract and retain high quality instructors. My hope is that the positive energy around the ratification of this agreement will carry over into the next round of negotiations for a new contract, which should begin later this year. But before we get there, we got to approve the agreement before us today. So we will hear today from representatives of the Washington Teachers Union, the City Administrator's Office, the Office of Labor Relations and Collective Bargaining, and DC Public Schools about the context of the contract negotiations that led to this deal. Although there will be no public testimony live testimony at this roundtable, members of the public may submit written testimony to the committee at our email address. Let's see, how do I say this? I guess this EXECADMIN dash labor at dccouncil.gov. Now I'll take a moment to recognize my colleague, the chairman of our council, Phil Mendelson, who has joined us in convening this roundtable. Chairman, you're on.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. And I think you're going to have to repeat that email address. Was that ex-admin labor?
Yeah,
That
yes, it is. Without a
Or
hyphen.
executive-
Okay.
Executive Administration and Labor Committee, ex-admin labor.
Yes, with a hyphen in between, ex-admin hyphen labor. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to be pretty brief. Thank you, Councilmember Bonds, and thank you for co-hosting, jointly doing this hearing. This issue is primarily under your committee since you deal with labor issues, but very much relevant to the education sector. The only thing I'm going to add to what you said is that the purpose of this hearing is to identify whether there are any issues in dispute between the parties with regard to the contract, which may sound a little strange to say, but I've been around long enough to know that sometimes the contract that actually comes to the council may not be exactly what the parties on both sides thought they had agreed to. But also there are some related questions, such as what are the funding implications for the charter sector, which is not part of this contract, but long has held, or it has been the policy that we fund this sectors equally. And I hesitate when I say equally because it's not literally equally, but on a proportionate basis. And then also I would like to know what the status is with regard to negotiating the next contract. So that's really what this is about, which is why the testimony is limited to the principles. Although as a public hearing, the public, of course, may comment. It is our intent, based on my last conversation with Councilmember Bonds, that we will put the contract before the full council next Tuesday at its legislative meeting so that the council's moving quickly and not get in the way of the implementation of this contract. But that's assuming that everything in the contract is as everybody agreed to. And with that, thank you, Councilmember Bonds.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mendelson. I also want to recognize my colleague, a member of our committee, and that is Councilmember Matt Fruman, representing the great community of Ward 3. Welcome. And you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Bonds. I too will try to be brief, but I guess I'm going to start with a tip of my hat to Alex Coma, who just did a column saying that he wondered whether on education issues you might see myself and Zachary Parker, Councilmember Parker from Ward 5, being more active. And lo and behold, here we are, the two other council members at this roundtable. I too want to hear about how this contract as submitted comports with what was negotiated. I think that's very important. The chairman and I have a difference on law and policy relating to how the two sectors are treated. I think in this context going forward, for sure, there's going to need to be an increase in the UPSFF that would benefit both sectors. I think thinking about how it might the policies or principles of equal treatment might apply with relation to retroactive pay is a thing we're going to need to talk about, because that would, if it were done, it would need to be done in a way that was proportional and fair to both of the sectors. I've been heartened to see some of the letters that have come in pledging to devote any retroactive resources directly to the teachers, but I think we're going to need to have a conversation internally about how we address those issues and how we make sure that if there is some comparable payment to the charter sectors, that it operates in a way that's similar to the way that it operates for DCPS. And then there are two, then there is the question of making sure that we have the process next time is not what the process was this time. This was a very drawn out contract, and we want to see things go more smoothly so that we don't have issues of long-term retroactive pay, so that we get this next contract done promptly. There is one issue that a constituent of mine has been raising, and that is that whether or not the contract as we have seen it comports with the contract as negotiated, there are a group of teachers who are left out. And those are teachers who left during the period of retroactive pay, but did not retire and were not deceased. And there is a significant number of those teachers. I think that's a thing we're going to need to think about, whether or not that needs to be addressed or how it could be addressed. Because we've had a situation with high teacher turnover and teachers who worked for significant periods covered by this contract and the retroactive pay, but are gone now. And shouldn't they be compensated for the work that they did during the time that they were working for DCPS? Is there a way to address that? So those are some of the things that are on my mind as I come to this roundtable, and I look forward to hearing the testimony of all of the witnesses.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Fruman. And I do recognize Councilmember Zachary Parker, my council member from Ward 5, the greatest community in the city. And so welcome, Councilmember Parker, and you can make opening remarks if you care.
Thank you, Chair Bonds. I too will be brief and want to thank you for hosting this joint roundtable. As has been mentioned, my interest here is to better understand the issues that remain with the contract, and to make sure what has been transmitted fully reflects negotiations. But also what I'm hoping to get out of today's conversation is to create a dialogue around how we can create smoother processes moving forward. I do want to commend Jacqueline Polk Lyons of the Teachers Union and her work on behalf of DC's public school teachers. But as my colleague, Councilmember Fruman mentioned, it should not have taken as long for us to get to this point. And I also recognize that we're reaching a cliff with the agreement that has been established. And soon we'll have to and should engage in future negotiations. And so while our government is providing incentives and bonuses for some within our district government, it begs the question, what are we going to do for our frontline workers, our teachers that are working tirelessly? Last thing I would just mention, I do know that there are questions around what we're going to do for the charter sector. I want to understand what some of those nuanced requests and needs are, but am seeing today's negotiation and contract as a unique circumstance, given the timeline that our public school teachers went without an agreement and a contract. So again, thank you. Looking forward to the discussion. Any way that I can be of help, please don't hesitate to let me know.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Parker. And now we will turn to Ms. Lyons, President of the Washington Teachers Union. You have the floor, and we're all ears to hear what you have to say about your proposed new contract.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning to all the council members who've assembled here at this roundtable. I am Jacqueline Polk Lyons, President of the Washington Teachers Union. I have taught in DC public schools for 29 years, and this year will, by August, be my 30th year. So I have a lot to celebrate. My last teaching assignment was as a kindergarten teacher at Savoy Elementary School. As president of the WTU, I am committed to fighting for social and educational justice for the students of the District of Columbia, as well as the well-being of district teachers. I'd like to thank the council for holding this roundtable. I am incredibly thankful to the educators and community members who worked tirelessly over the past 3 years to help the WTU reach an agreement with the administration on a new contract. WTU members overwhelmingly approved the contract by a landslide vote of 3,445 to 29. And I'm here to ask that the council ratify the agreement. Before I take questions, I want to provide some highlights from the contract. First, this agreement provides much needed support for educators who have worked tirelessly throughout the pandemic and puts the WTU and district educators in a much better position to negotiate another agreement to address the chronic issues facing the district's educational systems. Second, the proposed contract provides needed pay increases for DC educators. As you well know, the district has long suffered from some of the highest rates of teacher turnover in the nation. While increased pay alone will not solve the district's teacher turnover problems, the increased pay shows that district leadership is committed to treating teachers with the respect that they deserve. It will help to address concerns with the rising cost of living in the district that DC teachers face and indicates the mayor's commitment to investing in professionals who are educating our city's students. This agreement provides retro pay for all years since the last contract expired. Salary increases of 2%, 2.5, 3.5, and 4% respectively, totaling 12%. This means that average DC teacher salary increases up to from approximately $92,000 to $103,000, and that the starting salary for DC educators in DC public schools increases from $56,000 to just over $63,000. By September 2023, teachers will get a total of between $18,000 and $37,000 for retro pay, bonuses, and salary increases. Teachers will receive retroactive salary checks ranging from approximately $10,000 to over $20,000. This agreement also continues full vision, dental, and legal benefits. Health insurance and pension benefits continue under city administered programs. There will be a committee to study the feasibility of a 401(a) retirement plan for teachers too. And finally, the agreement provides much needed incentives for teachers who are going above and beyond to help address the long-standing and persistent achievement gaps that plague our city. For teachers who work outside their normal duties, the contract increases the administrative premium teachers receive by 50% to $60 an hour. Additionally, the agreement ensures that teachers receive at least 2 morning blocks per week to provide educators with adequate time to prepare lessons. Starting this year, there will be an added $1,500 stipend for special education designees, ELA representatives, and case managers. And there will be an added $1,500 stipend for hard-to-fill positions defined as social workers, psychologists, special education, math, science, world language, speech pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and all ESL teachers. This agreement being presented to you ends with the current 22-23 school year. This means that we'll begin negotiations again at the end of this school year. While I hope that the agreement provides a solid foundation to move forward, I also urge you to ensure that the district continues to invest in our students and pays special attention to the longstanding and persistent achievement gaps that plague our city. As I previously stated during hearings before the council, the WTU is extremely concerned about the city's achievement gaps, and we will continue to call for increased investments to improve learning conditions for students furthest from opportunity. Specifically, the WTU maintains that we must, 1, invest in smaller class sizes, especially in communities where significant gaps exist. 2, invest in co-teaching models, allowing teachers more time to plan and work directly with students who are struggling. And 3, ensure there is a full-time licensed librarian and media specialist in every school to support teachers and students. And lastly, 4, invest in Tier 2, Tier 3 research-based and proven strategies to improve literacy outcomes for all of our students. Additionally, given the increased violence that has impacted our students, the WTU continues to call for an increased investment in social emotional learning and mental health services in our schools. As we move into the next budget cycle, we hope that the mayor and the council will prioritize investing in mental health supports in our schools. Our schools will need additional resources, not less, to combat gaps that face our students. While this agreement is a positive step forward for DC educators and students, our schools will continue to struggle to meet the needs of students without ongoing additional investments. It is long past the time that we end competition for limited dollars within our school systems and work to coordinate across sectors to ensure that every student in the district receives a high quality education. Until we have coordinated cross-sector plans, we will continue to see funds diverted from our classrooms and fail to see the long-term sustained investments that our students need to thrive, regardless of their zip code or lottery results. I'd like to thank you for taking time to listen to me today. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the proposed contract, as well as the challenges that remain before us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that testimony. I just have a very few questions, and then I'm going to turn to Chairman Mendelson, and then I believe I see Councilmember Parker is still with us. So I just want to sort of clear the deck. Are there members of the teachers union that work in the charter school sector?
No.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Right, no, but I would be the first to say that we would like to organize our charter school teachers so that they also receive fair compensation and great working conditions, which also lead to wonderful wonderful learning conditions for students.
Thank you for that response. I was just very curious because I believe one of my colleagues made reference to some teachers that were left out, and I was just wondering, since we are all concerned about the charter schools, although today we are hopefully focused on DC public schools because that's where the contract is with those that are in DC public school. I just wanted to make sure that that point was established. Thank you, President Line, for that.
Thank you.
Do you have any concerns about this contract at this time?
No, I don't have any concerns. But the main, I guess I said, the main concern that I have is that our teachers get money in hand as soon as possible, because we go back to the table in June. In fact, our union members are preparing for that fact. And it's been a long time coming, and our teachers have been through a lot with the pandemic, teaching virtually, then coming back into the classroom during the pandemic, even though they were worried. I want to also emphasize that they knew the best place for our students to learn was in the classroom, in person. And even though they were afraid, they came back into the classroom, and 98.9% of our teachers heeded the call to get vaccinated because they knew that was the best way to keep our children safe. And so they weathered inflation, high gas prices, high food prices. I want to remind everyone that many of our members are between the ages of 25 and 39. And they're at a point in their lives, like I was at that point in my life, of trying to buy homes and try to have children and make sure that they're able to do the things that they like to do for their families. And we want to make sure that we keep those young folks to stay in our community and teach.
Thank you very much for that response, because you mentioned something dear to my heart, and that is the recent proposal that, the council approved to include our teachers in what we call our first responders. So now there's an extra so-called financial premium that goes to our teachers that use the HCAP and seek to become homeowners in the city. I hope that you will encourage many to do that, and I'm hoping that we will all be encouraging the IZ program to look at our teachers, those that may qualify. I think you mentioned the start salary being 56, starting at 56,000. They would qualify if it's one, and if it's two in a household, they definitely qualify for the IZ program. So please encourage them, because these programs are for people in the District of Columbia that also are looking for housing. And we find that frequently it is those who are looking to work in the district that come and take advantage of our programs. We'd like to, those that are already here, let's get them an opportunity as well. So I'm happy to hear that you're poised to make sure that our younger teachers are engaged, in this fashion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The one other point, and I see that Councilmember Fruman is with us, so I will let my colleagues ask their immediate questions, but I wanted to get some sense from you as to, do you have any advice for the government as it relates to, now that you're happy with your contract, as to how and where we might go with those that are in the charter section that are not a part of your teachers union process?
Well, I'd like to say that this contract came to fruition through the hard work and dedication of our members and the parents and students and the communities who support the work that we do every day with the children of the district. All of the money from our negotiation of this contract will go straight into the pockets of District of Columbia public school teachers. The union, the WTU, supports all teachers who work in the district, but I'm really concerned that this charter school money will not go into the hands of its teachers. And I'm concerned that they don't have contracts that ensure good working conditions for those teachers, which also we know adds up for wonderful learning conditions for our students. This is why, like I said before, the WTU would like to support these teachers in organizing to make sure that they receive fair compensation and working conditions. And I know that the city council can control how much money they receive. And I would challenge those charter schools to ensure that, just like the money we negotiated goes straight into the hands of our teachers, that their money goes straight into the hands of teachers. And I know that our taxpayers, the DC taxpayers have concerns about where that money's going. And charter schools can ensure that this money is going into the hands of teachers.
So, Ms. Line, are you telling us that it's your recommendation that the items within your contract be matched for the teachers in the charter school sector?
Right, like I said, I challenged the charter schools to give fair compensation to their teachers, and to also we would again like to work with them in ensuring that they have the working conditions that we negotiated for our DC public school teachers, and ensure district taxpayers that this money is going straight into the pockets of teachers. And right now, we can't say that. And that's what concerns the WTU. And I'm sure it concerns many of its taxpayers.
So, Ms. Lines, the total value of your contract is what?
Oh, you're gonna have to make me look deep.
Okay.
I'm gonna look right now. I believe the total is 346 million for fiscal year 2023, and that funding, I believe, and somebody can check me if they can, is available through the Workforce Investment Fund, as well as the American Recovery Plan Act.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for that. I just, want it on the airwaves that, this is a strong contract with lots of dollars included in it. And when we talk about what the contract contains financially, and the idea that we should also be looking at compensation for charter positions, teachers, we're also talking about something in that neighborhood as well. Because they're not included in this contract. But if we are to provide compensation that is equal, I think the chairman, Chairman Mendelson mentioned that, then this is what we're talking about, 3 or 6 times 2. So I just wanted to make sure. I'm running out of time, and so I'm going to turn now. Thank you very much for your comments. I'm going to turn now to Chairman Mendelson.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds, and thank you, Ms. Pogue-Lyons, for your testimony.
Thank you.
I have 6 questions. The first is to document before the council today what both parties agreed to, and implicit, if not explicit, in your testimony is yes, it is.
Yes.
My next 4 questions are really for the executive. What is the payment schedule for all the payments to the WTU members? What is the plan for proportionately equal funding for the charter sector? What is the source for all the money needed to fund the collective bargaining agreement? And how does this affect the financial plan and budget? And what about the complaint that former WTU teachers are being left out? I'm going to ask those of the executive. You're free to comment on any of them if you want to right now.
Well, I guess one thing that I want to comment on is the WTU is still waiting for the final payment schedule in writing. But I want to just reiterate that our members have been thoroughly briefed on the city's approval process for this contract. They know that they voted overwhelmingly for it. They also knew that it had to be reviewed by the Attorney General, the city administrator, the chief financial officer, the mayor, and now that it sits and rests with the city council. And we also want to add that we know that this is a huge document, and that if there are any final edits that need to be made because of the size of the document, that we will definitely work with the district to make those edits and changes before it comes to you to vote on by next week.
Thank you. I do want to note and clarify the fiscal impact statement from the chief financial officer indicates that the $346 million cost is the 4-year cost. It'll cost $148 million this fiscal year, which includes the retroactive payments. And then next year, fiscal year 2024, it will cost $57 million, almost $58 million. And that goes up each year. In 2026, it will cost $74.6 million. So that $346 million is a 4-year total for the DCPS. There is no estimate with regard to the charter sector. And while the charter sector is roughly half, it's actually a little less than half of the total student enrollment in our public education system. My 6th question is about bargaining the new contract. So you can speak to that. I heard you say June. I'm going to push back. The current contract took how many years to negotiate?
Unfortunately, it took 3 years. The contract before that was 5 years. And we go back to the table in June, but my wonderful members have already started meeting and planning for going back to the table in June. The preparations have already started, and we're excited, and we're stayed on the fact that we don't want to relive the last 2 contracts, that we must, if we want to get and keep great teachers, have a contract that is done on time. I'll even go even further to say we have great empathy for those teachers who left while we were negotiating this contract, because we know that this contract that we have right now doesn't take into consideration those folks who have left us. But I can say a start to fixing this problem is to making sure that we're never in arrears, that a law, in my opinion, and the union's opinion, should be passed so that we don't have contracts where we have to wait 5 and 3 years
Well,
before they're signed.
why wait until June? Who picked the June date?
I guess that's when we go back to the table, but I can assure you that the WTU is not waiting until June. We started the process of planning last week, had an official meeting.
Well, I don't mean to be putting you on the spot, but I am a little bit here, because you cannot assure that the executive will bargain quickly. You can only assure that you will bargain quickly. I don't know who bargained more quickly or less quickly or more slowly or less slowly over the last 3 years, 4 years. But I believe the law provides that within something like a year of the expiration date of a contract, that either party may send a letter to the other saying we want to begin negotiations, which is to say you could send a letter to the executive today saying you want to begin negotiations now. And that starts the clock. I
Agreed.
think
And I just feel like there's always been a sense of urgency as far as the Washington Teachers Union is concerned, to get what is fair and right for our members, which is a contract on time. I just hope that this contract, the success that we finally had in getting it, will lead to a sense of urgency for DCPS in the district.
I suppose I could belabor the point, but all I would be doing is belaboring the point.
No, I agree. And I should have added, definitely, we agree, Chairman Mendelson, and I understand where you're coming from. And that's why, not to go back in the past, that's why we were hopeful that we would not, and push that we would not be coming back to the table, that we would have an extension and not have to come back to the table in June.
I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Bonds?
Yes, thank you very much. Now turn to Councilmember Fruman. You have a question, I presume.
Thank you very much. I have a question and a little bit of comment. One of the things that's a thread that's coming through is what do we do vis-a-vis the charter sector? And I think it's going to be really important to think about what is proportionality and parity in this context, because the sectors are quite different. And what does that mean in the setting of percentage increases in retroactive pay and a percentage increase in pay going forward? And to me, an absolute threshold is those dollars need to go directly to teachers. Any kind of percentage increase would need to go directly to teachers. If anything different were to happen, that's not parity or proportionality. That would undermine DCPS and the union, who brought this increase to the table. And that applies to both backwards and forwards. I think that we need to be thinking about, if there's new money that's come as a result of this contract, then that new money needs to go directly to charter school teachers, who are often paid much less. And we want to see every teacher in the District of Columbia fairly compensated. And we should think about requirements that come with this to maintain at a minimum the living wage, which I think is in the low $60,000. But that can be a conversation going forward. And if that were to happen, we'd need very strict enforceable terms on which to do that. Another thing is, and President Hoglines, you talked about how the WTU brought this agreement to the table. Well, the WTU has costs, and the teachers in the DCPS system who are members of the WTU pay dues and bear the cost of the WTU doing this work. If other teachers were to get the benefit of this, they should be paying their fair share of the hard work that the WTU did. And so figuring out how to make sure that that happens, I think would be quite important. There's another difference in the context between the sectors, and that is the charter sector has the capacity to bank dollars in a way that DCPS does not. And sometimes those dollars accumulate to be very high numbers, not for every LEA, but for some of the LEAs. And where LEAs have made a choice to build reserves as opposed to more fairly pay their teachers, I think that we need to look at whether or not they should bear a share of this. That's often city dollars that are sitting in reserve accounts already. So I think we would need to deal with that. And lastly, between the charter sector and DCPS, I think the charter sector views a comparative advantage that they are not unionized. And so it is an irony that they would seek to benefit from the union while they try to also benefit from the fact that they are not unionized. And so any LEA or the teachers at any LEA who got a benefit from the work of the WTU, I think it's imperative that they have the ability to negotiate to be a part of the WTU going forward. But however this is going to work, we need to think about what is real parity, not just throw around big giant numbers, but what is real parity in this context. And there will be more conversation about that in the days and weeks to come. The question that I have, and I often, when I would watch council hearings, I thought, why does that council member just go off and give a speech and not ask a question? And so now I'm that guy, so I apologize for that. But I do think it's important to, that whole subject is a big thing that's on the table today, and I wanted to get views out there on it. I am, like Chairman Mendelson, somewhat troubled by the fact that teachers who left during the time of negotiation aren't covered here. And one of the things, and President Pogue Lyons, you're absolutely right. We need to create working conditions where we keep people. But it's been a challenge, and having policies that have resulted in high teacher turnover and then not compensating the people who did great work for the time they were here, but just couldn't do it under the working conditions that existed or chose something different. I hope we can find a way so that we are delivering some of the benefit of these negotiations to those teachers who worked during years of the retroactive pay and but have left since. And I guess my question to you is, in principle, would you also like to see that? And if so, why is it that it was not included in this contract from your perspective?
Well, one thing as I said before, I have great empathy, and I know many of those teachers who left for many different reasons that you sympathize with. And particularly because I said we have a turnover sometimes between 700, 800, 900 teachers every year. And people who came in ready to do the work of educating our children. But people have to remember that we worked on this contract for 3 years. And there are many things that we wanted for our members that we tried hard, that we tried to work to make to come to fruition, but it didn't. And I'm hopeful that it can happen in our next contract.
Thank you very much, Chairman Bonds. I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. Just want to make sure that the quality of the transmission is clear so that we can hear everyone. Thank you very much. Now we'll turn to Councilmember Parker. You may have questions, sir.
Thank you. President Polk Lyons, can you detail in your perspective some of the pain points that the union experienced leading up to this contract? And I ask, so as we're thinking about future processes, how we can not go through this again.
Well, again, you want me to go back in the past? Because again, I worked on the contract for a year and a half, but I have members.
In that last year and a half, what were some of the pain points? Because it was my understanding on both sides, there were points of tension and confusion and pain points. So I'm going to ask the same question later, but I would love your perspective of what would you have preferred to be different through that year and a half process?
Well, I said it before, a sense of urgency that we're hemorrhaging teachers from year to year, and that our teachers who come here want to work and want to teach. They have a love for this work, but working conditions, number one, and that's what we worked day in and day out on this contract, was to improve working conditions. And many of the things that we worked hard for, we weren't able to achieve, like planning time, which especially more planning time for our SPED teachers and our related service providers. Smaller classroom sizes, particularly for our members who work with children with special needs. I particularly want to emphasize planning time again, because we know what our students have gone through over the last 3 years, and that there's a lot of, there's a gap that we have to fill in. And the way we fill that in is for teachers to have thoughtful time to prepare for their students. Working conditions. We know that through the pandemic that technology is number one. Even though we're back in person, we have to make sure our technology is up to speed. We get lots of concerns about that. We know that good working conditions makes for great learning conditions. That is a constant concern for our teachers, is that the same place that our teachers are teaching is the same place where our students are learning, and no one should have to continually worry about heat and air and safety of plaster and plumbing. And what do you do to ensure that the working conditions are there for both students and teachers? And again, ensuring that the compensation piece, we keep up with it, because many of our teachers, I've already said how old they are, they're finding that their peers in other professions can make sometimes 20% to a third more than they make. And maybe it's not a big concern when you first start teaching, but as you move up into your 5th, 6th, 7th, and 10th year, that can become an issue where you start to question, can you sustain or can you stay in this career? Because when you see your peers making more, and sometimes in many cases their peers don't have as high education as they do, but they're making more. So these are concerns that we have to have, I would say, for the next 20 years, as we see many people like me start to retire.
And I imagine those are going to be concerns that you address in this next iteration or round of contracts. Going to the money piece, how long was it that teachers went without an increase in their pay?
Our last contract ended in September of 2019.
So I want to make clear to people that may be watching this, that during the pandemic, as you put it, as teachers risked their lives, I know there was a lot of debate whether or not teachers are going to go back into buildings. That was accompanied by teachers not having a real financial increase in their pay. And that is just underscoring why this is so important. Also, I want to make clear, when are teachers expected to start getting residual pay from this contract once it's transmitted?
Well, that's what we're waiting for in writing. We know that first it has to be passed by the city council, and then 30 days after that, teachers are expecting to receive their new the compensation piece of their new contract. But again, I want to emphasize we've been following the process, and we're waiting for the details in writing for the pay.
And so when you say waiting for the details, there's a chance that it may be longer than 30 days.
Well, we're hopeful that it will not be. I have always been very open that we're concerned with the district's lack of urgency in paying our teachers. We still are working on getting some teachers paid for summer school. We're still waiting on getting some teachers paid for doing curriculum work and study abroad work over the summer. We have some teachers that we have challenges in getting them the pay that they're owed when they go on family medical leave. So there is concern that well, let's say this, the word is urgency, that the city DCPS understands that we must pay people what they're owed in a timely manner.
And I'm hopeful that we can get clarity around what that timeline will be, because it seems like there's some uncertainty there, whether that will in fact be 30 days. A few more questions. I know in this contract, the money has been the headline, but there are other things in here, namely supports for teachers as they've kind of gone through a pandemic. I know that there's been a lot of talk about the evaluation process for DCPS teachers. Can you speak to what discussions, if any, there have been through this contract process with the evaluation process and how there could be greater collaboration? I know it speaks to DCPS and the union collaborating around the evaluation process, but was that part of the negotiations or discussions? And if so, in what way?
Well, we can't negotiate how teachers are evaluated through the contract. That's separate. How teachers are evaluated is through city law. And everyone, I hope is aware that 2 years ago, the American University found that the evaluation system that is used by the District of Columbia Public Schools is racist and biased, particularly against Brown and Black teachers. And
but you would agree, but you would agree that teachers should be evaluated, right?
Oh, I definitely agree that teachers should be evaluated, but they want to be evaluated fairly. They want to be evaluated without bias, and particularly because I am
I'm hearing you say,
teacher of color. I just wanted to finish this point, especially because I am also a teacher of color, and we know that the majority of the students that we teach come from diverse backgrounds. I think that it is not acceptable that we have a system that has been found to be racist. And we as a union have had, unfortunately, to focus a large amount of our time on getting a contract. But I have told my members over and over again that the next priority on our list is that this system has to be has to change on how we're evaluated. And one part of the way of changing the system is to have us come to the table. One of the reasons why we have high turnover in this city is not just because of the lack of a contract, it's because of the lack of fairly evaluating our teachers.
Thank you for that. There is a section here within the contract that talks about the ways in which teachers will evaluate. So I would love to follow up and just discuss offline. I'm glad to hear you agree that teachers should be evaluated, and it's not a matter of should they or shouldn't they, but how do we make sure that teachers feel as though there is a fair evaluation system in place, where you're suggesting there is research that perhaps the system in place now is not. And so thank you for clarifying that. And I just want to end here on this discussion around parity with the charter sector. I want to agree and associate myself with one thing that Councilmember Fruman said, that parity in this instance, if we are going to provide resources to the other sector, is that money should go to teachers, just like the money here is going to teachers' compensation. And I think anything outside of that is going to make it difficult for me to get there. I also just want to disagree and push that while there are some charters that are flush with cash, there are many standalone charters, namely in Ward 5, headed by people of color, Black leaders that could use support as well. So thank you, President Polk-Lyons, for your time, and I'm hoping that this next process can be a lot smoother. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Parker. Chairman, I wanted to ask you if you have any follow-up questions before we move to our government witness.
I do not. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, President. And as you can tell, we'll be following up with you on as you move into the new contract period. So we're very anxious to be there for you and to make sure that we, if nothing else, that we retain our teachers that are so necessary to our educational product in the city. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Your time. We will now turn to our government witness, and I will ask our city administrator, Kevin Donahue, and the chief of staff of the Office of Labor Relations and Collective Bargaining, Ms. Asa Alt, if they will come forward and we will swear you in. You would, I think I see Mr. Lindsay Maxwell. Forgive me for looking down, but my monitor is down and I'm trying to get the images that come up. So I believe I see Mr. Yes, Mr. Maxwell. You will be representing your office.
Good morning. Yes, Madam Chair.
All right. Okay. All right. So if you both will raise your right hand.
And good afternoon. I believe we also have Amy Mastera from DCPS who will be available to answer questions.
All right. Okay, now I do. Thank you very much for being here as well. All right, raise your right hand, and do you swear or affirm that your testimony and any statements that you make before us today to be truthful and complete?
I do.
I do.
All right, thank you. All right, and so we will start with our city administrator, Mr. Donahue.
Good afternoon. First of all, is my audio okay?
It's very loud, but I'm in a boom session, so it's okay.
I usually don't get it too loud.
All right, I know.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Bonds, Chairman Mendelson, members and staff of the Committee on Executive Administration and Labor, and the Committee of the Whole. I'm Kevin Donahue, and I have the privilege of serving as a City Administrator. Today, I'll be providing a testimony along with OLRCB Director Lindsay Maxwell. We will both be brief on the collective bargaining agreement between the district and the Washington Teachers Union. I want to start by acknowledging the hard work over many months by the labor negotiation teams at the Office of Labor Relations and Collective Bargaining, at DCPS, and the Washington Teachers Union. I particularly want to acknowledge the direct involvement of OLRCB Director Lindsay Maxwell, DCPS Chancellor Louis Farabee, and WTU President Jackie Pogue-Lyons in helping us get to a final agreement. The collective bargaining agreement provides WTU members with a 12% increase in compensation over the 4-year term of the contract. It also provides teachers with a 4% retention bonus, and teachers in hard-to-fill positions will receive a $1,500 retention payment. We believe this agreement provides our educators with competitive raises that will help the district retain and attract the best talent for our public schools. We expect the fiscal year 20 to 23 cost of living adjustment payments and retention bonuses to be paid to WTU members on March 24th, and I'll go into that in more detail in Q&A. I need to emphasize how good this collective bargaining agreement is for the more than 5,000 educators covered by this agreement. And I actually should say it's not just good, it's a great contract and one that we're all very proud of. It will serve as a baseline, not only for our teachers, but for the teachers in the entire region. This concludes my portion of the testimony. I will now turn it over to OLRCB Director Lindsay Maxwell to provide his remarks, and then I will be available along with the team to answer questions.
May I proceed, Madam Chair?
Yes, please do. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Chairperson Bonds, Chair of the Committee on Executive Administration and Labor, Chairman Mendelson, Chairman of the Committee of the Whole, members, and staff. I am E. Lindsay Maxwell II. I am the Director of the Office of Labor Relations and Collective Bargaining, and I'm pleased to testify before you today on PR 25-63, the Compensation and Working Conditions Agreement between the District of Columbia Public Schools and the Washington Teachers Union Local 6 of the American Federation of Teachers Approval Resolution of 2023. The work of the District of Columbia government is faithfully performed every day by its roughly 37,000 employees. About 26,000 of those employees have exercised their right to collectively bargain over their compensation and working conditions with the district government through their duly elected representatives. I want to take a few minutes to highlight the work that the DC Public Schools was recently able to accomplish in partnership with WTU. WTU's membership includes roughly 5,500 DCPS employees representing a range of positions within the DCPS system, including teachers, counselors, librarians. DCPS and WTU held their initial bargaining session in August of 2019. Amid a global pandemic, economic uncertainty, and school closures, a team of dedicated representatives from DCPS and WTU continued to participate in bargaining sessions. Together, we methodically advanced negotiations intent on stewarding the district's resources to support educators as they continue to strive to improve outcomes for DCPS students during an extraordinarily difficult learning period. On behalf of Mayor Bowser, we present to you a new 4-year agreement with the WTU, which provides bargaining unit members with a 12% increase in compensation over the life of the contract. I want to highlight the compensation increases here. For fiscal year 20, a retroactive 2% pay increase. In fiscal year 21, a retroactive 2.5% pay increase. For fiscal year 22, a retroactive 3.5% pay increase. And for fiscal year 23, a 4% increase. In addition to the salary increases, WTU members will receive a 4% retention bonus. WTU members in hard-to-fill positions will receive a $1,500 retention bonus, and WTU members performing key duties will receive an annual stipend of $1,500. These increases demonstrate Mayor Bowser's commitment to supporting DCPS by making an equitable investment in the professionals who play a critical role in improving the learning environment and the academic progress of students. I want to thank the Mayor, DCPS Chancellor Dr. Lewis Fairby, and our labor partners in this effort, especially the lead negotiators for WTU, former President Liz Davis, who tragically passed away during the early phase of this negotiation of this contract, and her successor, Union President Jackie Cole Lyons, and legal counsel Lee Jackson. It has been a pleasure working with them both. I also want to give a special thanks to DCPS's lead negotiators Jay Fuller and former OLRCB attorney advisor Stephanie Maltz. Finally, I want to recognize and thank Chairperson Bonds and the members of her committee for their commitment to being critical allies in this effort. Our office looks forward to continuing to work together to achieve shared goals and to support the public servants who deliver essential services to district residents every day. Your commitment to labor relations in DC government will continue to make the district a great place to live and work by giving more district employees a fair shot. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And I'll ask the representative from, I guess, the Chancellor's office from DC Public Schools, if you have a statement you'd like to make, or are you just available to respond to questions?
Good afternoon, Councilmember Bonds. I am here to respond to any questions you may have, but also on behalf of the Chancellor, I want to share how excited we are to reach this agreement, and I'm happy to address any details as needed.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your comments. I think you've heard some very robust discussion this morning regarding the contract, and let's just sort of get right to it, and let's talk about this elephant in the room, and that is those teachers that have left the system and are not included in the contract. Just wanted to get your perspective on what is your thinking as to whether or not we as a government need to look more closely at the compensation that can be available to assist these teachers. And I'll start with
Uh,
city administrator.
Thank you. I will start and I'll see if Director Maxwell has anything to add. It's a question that certainly comes up throughout each negotiation and agreement. What's in this agreement is pretty clear, which is it provides retroactive pay for those who have retired or those who are now deceased. The language in the contract regarding those who departed and are no longer members of the WTU are pretty consistent with what we see in other contracts and other parts of government. And we negotiated what's in the agreement reflects what gets negotiated. And as a policy matter, I'm somewhat neutral in the question. I want to make sure we live up to what's in the negotiated agreement. But it's pretty consistent with what we see in other parts of government.
All right. Thank you for that response. And now I want to ask Mr. Maxwell, what was your thinking during the negotiations? Did that issue surface?
So Chairperson, unfortunately of the statute, we're prohibited from discussing actual terms that were discussed at the table. But I'd just like to stand and confirm exactly what the CA just said, which is what we have in front of us is very consistent with what we've done with other unions. And what's in the contract is what's in the contract.
All right. Okay. We needed that statement on the record. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Maxwell. The other question that I have is it was mentioned that our payment plan is delayed. Mr. Maxwell, can you shed some light on the payment plan? I know the city administrator mentioned March 24 would be the payout date. It's my understanding. Is that what you have in your payment plan as the start of this process?
Council member, I'm happy to sort of go into some more detail around that. So this is an important question, and it's one that we will work towards with our utmost urgency. Also one that I'm happy following this hearing to make sure we provide in writing to the WTU president. But let me set some context to how pay increases are done, whether it's COLA increases and retro payments. So for any payment, no matter it's the WTU, police, fire, office workers, there's a 6-step process that is done by the OCFO staff, OCTO staff, and DCHR. And that process involves looking at the data in PeopleSoft, making sure it's clean for any, say, duplication or errors, running calculations that reflect the pay increases or the retro payments, and then doing tests to validate and verify so that we know when payments are made, there won't be errors. This is done by a small team that is working at a breakneck pace right now, and a pretty old system that's highly customized. So to some extent, the process is the process. And we act with urgency throughout it, but there's a certain point at which operationally, I can't push the process faster than what it inherently requires. So the reflection of this there's 3 payments that WTU members will get. One is a retention bonus. A second is a pay increase. And the third is retroactive payments. The retention bonus and the pay increase, when they'll get cash in hand, both of those based on the schedule provided to me after sort of expressing great urgency by the OCFO, OCTO, and DCHR, reflects that date of March 24th. Retroactive payments are more complicated because they have to look at data of who was employed at different points in time over the past 3 years. And sometimes there's duplication, sometimes employees left and came back. So they have to go through more rigorous quality checks. Those timeframes reflect everything we've done for other union agreements outside of WTU. There's an additional complicating factor with this contract, which is it's a very robust contract financially, and to be able to pay for some of it, particularly the retroactive payments, does require an appropriation of the budget that has to be sent to be approved by the council above and beyond approving this contract. So that is not needed. It's not needed for educators that are W-2 members to get their pay increases or the retention bonuses. That additional step is needed for the retroactive payments, and it would be sent to the council in a supplemental budget to make sure those funds, while we can pay for it, we have to make sure that all the funds are appropriated. So the retroactive payments take longer than the end of March because of both the need for an appropriation and the additional amount of quality checks needed to be done by OCTO and the OCFO. And I'm going to happily put all that in writing to make sure it is very clear for President Poglines.
Thank you, Mr. City Administrator. I'm new to this, as you well know, and so I have to ask this probably ignorant question. When you talk about the appropriation by the council and the supplemental budget to the council, we have been in this process. We know we have teachers on board. We know we had teachers on board in 2020, 2021, 2022. And we're talking about the retroactive, just wondering if there was the possibility where we could have at the council received some sort of supplemental request, you know, earlier. Just wondering. I don't know how this process works, but we're going to learn how it works.
No, it's a very good question, and sort of it was not possible for two reasons that are different reasons. One is we needed to know what the amounts were going to be in the contract itself. So prior to finalizing the negotiation, it would have been unclear how much we would have had to have appropriated. We don't know that till the agreement's done, until the agreement's ratified. And second, and this is sort of an important note for just provide overall context, this is not the only contract to require multiple years of retroactive payments. In fact, virtually all of our contracts, which will be about 12 to 15 meaningful CBAs across about 30,000 employees, all were done after the old contracts had lapsed for a year or two. And there's a reason for that. That's separate and apart from the need for appropriation for this contract. And that's for many of the agreements, they just happened by coincidence to expire in the depths of our COVID recession. So how do we come to an agreement in 2020 or even 2021? For a number of unions, they knew, as we did, that our revenues had not recovered. So we would not have been in a position to provide the kind of outstanding and generous packages that is reflected in this agreement or others. We would have looked at a very different financial picture if there was, say, a clock that would have expired after a year from expiration that for many unions, not just this one, would have not put those members in an advantageous position because the city's resources would have been so constrained that we would not have been in a position to agree to the kind of increases that are reflected in what's before you today. So that's another reason why this and about a dozen other contracts all have been finalized in the past 9 months that reflect prior agreements that expired at some point in 2020. This one happens to be so large in its size that we have to also reappropriate money to pay for it, which we would do through a supplemental budget.
Okay, and so then, Mr. Donahue, if we were to check the records of previous contracts prior to COVID, we would find that there is a situation where all the contracts had been developed on time or within the time frame.
They each have a different pace that's often unique to the dynamics within the union and within the agency. So there was a time when our police union just wouldn't, we could not come to any agreement with our police union for years. There was also times when we would have an agreement with, say, the fire union that all occurred within just a few short months of negotiation. So there are different dynamics that are often very unique. What my point about the revenues in 2020 is that one thing that connects all of them together is that many of them happen to expire when our revenues were hit very hard by a COVID recession. And it wasn't to anyone's best interest, most notably the unions, to try to force through an agreement when the city's revenues had not recovered to the point where we could fund some of the things that you see, say, in this contract before you.
All right. Well, thank you. That's an entirely different response, but thank you very, very much for your response. Chairman Mendelson, turn to you for questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. So let me see. I have a half dozen questions. The first one is the document before the council today what both parties agreed to? And I'm assuming since the executive submitted this, that you all are comfortable that the document reflects what was negotiated.
Yes.
The second question I have is regarding the payment schedule. So even though you just went over this with Councilmember Bonds, I'm going to address this slightly differently, but I think I understand what the schedule is. The agreement includes a 4% increase for fiscal year 2023, and that's funded and will be paid beginning around March 24th.
Correct.
And the agreement includes a 4% retention bonus, and that will be paid around March 24th.
Correct.
The agreement also provides WTU bargaining unit members in hard-to-fill positions with a $1,500 retention bonus, and for members who are performing key duties, a $1,500 annual stipend in the 2022-23 and 23-24 school year. So that will begin around March 24th?
Were you asking about the retroactive payments?
No, I'll repeat again. The agreement also provides WTU bargaining unit members in hard-to-fill positions with a $1,500 retention bonus, and for members performing key duties, a $1,500 annual stipend in the 2022-23 and 23-24 school years.
To the best of my knowledge, yes, but I actually want to confirm that specific detail, which I will also include in what I submit in writing after this hearing.
Okay, just as a hint, I'm reading from the mayor's transmittal letter. And then with regard to the wage increase of 2.5% for FY20, 2.5% for FY21, and 3.5% for FY22, those will require an appropriation by the council, which will be done through a supplemental budget that the executive will be submitting.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, I'm assuming that supplemental will be submitted along with the fiscal year 24 proposed budget on March 22nd.
That's correct, Chairman.
And since typically a supplemental budget addresses other issues, will all this be in that one supplemental budget, or will the executive submit two supplemental budgets as you did, I believe, last year?
It will be, it's a very good question, Chairman. I believe it'll be two. This will be a standalone, which will allow for the council to move expeditiously on this and not have a commingle with other investments that might be reflected in a supplemental budget.
Okay, and I believe last year, which means literally calendar year 2022, when we had two supplementals, and I think one of them was a standalone regarding teachers or regarding DCPS, that we enacted that, or rather we adopted it simultaneously with first reading on the fiscal year budget.
That's correct, Chairman.
Which means I don't have that date in front of me, probably action by the council at our May meeting.
That's correct. That's my recollection as well, Chairman.
And then how quickly will your folks be geared up to make the payments, the retroactive payments?
The team that programs in and does the quality checks will be working on those payments in anticipation of the schedule that you just outlined. In other words, submitting a supplemental budget, having it passed upon first reading. That would allow for us to make a payment at, I believe, if the timing that you laid out is correct, in the pay period right after the approval of that supplemental budget, which would be around May 19th.
Okay, and you're going to put all this in writing to the teachers union?
Yes, and I will make sure that the council members are CC'd on that.
Okay, do you think you'll do that before Tuesday's vote?
I will give it my best effort.
All right,
That
I'm
was
not,
the intention going and leaving this year.
okay. I think what's most helpful is that you will do it quickly and in writing. What is the plan for proportionately equal funding for the charter sector? And before you answer that, I want to, if I can do this, note, we received some testimony from other entities, including charter schools. This hearing, just the nature of it, is limited to the government officials and the teachers union. But I do want to read this. This is from Pat Brantley, who is the chief executive for the Friendship of Public Charter Schools. And in her what she submitted, she said in part, it should be noted that this legislation is quite a departure from the past treatment of schools. I'm writing to bring awareness to the approach in 2017, when the WTU contract was last negotiated. At that time, the charter sector was provided equivalent funding, both retroactively and with the go-forward amount, on the same timeline as DCPS. This provided parity between both halves of the sector and enabled charter schools to allocate funding to educators who now serve nearly 50% of students in the district. It is essential that the entire sector take all reasonable steps to attract and retain the very best educators. Our system is in crisis from a human capital perspective. Depriving half the system of much needed resources negatively impacts the whole. Doing so at this time of the year, when most LEAs have started their efforts to retain current staff and recruit new staff for the upcoming school year, puts charter schools at a significant disadvantage and thereby is a detriment to our students. With this in mind, we've heard some concerns about how charters will spend these additional resources. I can commit that Friendship will use 100% of the funds intended to increase educator compensation for that purpose. We did so in 2017 and will do so again with any funding granted. Now, I read that because I thought it was important to put it in the record. But my question to you is, what is the plan for proportionally equal funding for the charter sector?
It's a very good and important question. It is one that gets reflected in the formulation of the mayor's budget, is not inherently tied to the approval of this WTU contract. So the budget's not done, and it's something that we're looking at closely as we are every important issue that has to get wrapped into the budget. And it's not one either in the specific nature or general nature that I can get ahead of the budget process for.
Okay, maybe I'll leave it at that for the moment. I sort of know the answer to this next question. What is the source of all money needed to fund the collective bargaining agreement? And how does this affect the financial plan and budget?
It's a very important question. There are 4 funding sources used to fund this budget, which over the 4-year financial plan totals almost $450 million. One is ARPA money that was unspent in FY22 and cannot be used for the same purpose to continue forward the work of its originally intended use. A second source of the funding is within DCPS and their ability to absorb within vacancy savings, the ability to fund the contract. A third source is projections for increased Medicaid revenue. And the final fourth source is funding from the Workforce Investment Fund. I should note the first and last sources being the unspent ARPA money that was budgeted for FY22, as well as the Workforce Investment Fund, make up the vast majority of funding this over the 4 years. It's also not equally distributed since there will be a retention bonus paid this fiscal year. The largest amount of the cost is reflected in FY23.
Does any of this require, these different sources require reprogramming?
No, I do believe it requires, some of it requires an appropriation from the council.
Which again will come with the supplemental budget.
Correct.
Now, my next question, although I see I have 11 seconds left, concerns, in fact, maybe Councilmember Bonds, I think if there's a second round, I'll wait.
Yes, we can have a second round because I think we do want to talk a little bit about these funding sources and how they
Right.
may affect some other program. Thank
All
you.
right, so I have 2 more questions. I'll wait for the next round. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I will, oh, all right. Councilmember Fruman, have a round.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. Thank you for your testimony. The questions are raised about a couple of groups that are not covered by the contract. So strictly speaking, this hearing is about approving the contract or not, and whether there's fidelity between the contract negotiated and the contract that's in front of the council. And I think those things have been resolved. My takeaway from the testimony so far, and City Administrator Donahue, if you can confirm it, is that to the extent that there is a mechanism dealt with to address the requests from the charter sector that funds be for retroactive pay be directed to their teachers, and any effort to try to provide funding for teachers who were at DCPS during the retroactive period pay period but left, we should address that through this supplemental appropriations process, that we should be working on solutions for those things before then and try to incorporate it at that point. Is that the way we would address this from your those things from your perspective?
From my perspective, there's 2 different vehicles for looking at those questions. The question about who is covered by retroactive payments is, to my knowledge, really done through negotiation and reflected in the collective bargaining agreement. I'm not sure there's a way within law to have something supersede what's negotiated, but that is something like we can look at later, but that is negotiated. And I want to stress that what's in this agreement is typical and common for other agreements. And I got a note from a member of I think the DCPS staff that it's also typical of the WTU agreement going back quite a while. The second question around funding for the charter sector, the vehicle for addressing that is in fact the budget process. And so that's why my response to the chairman's questions are fairly narrowly tailored to this agreement, because I'm trying to not commingle either this contract with that issue or the funding that we had identified to fund this contract to the penny with that issue. That's really is done through the budget process. And as you know, our budget's not done yet. And so it limits what I can say in this forum without getting ahead of the budget process.
But for that, just so I understand the implications, that you're talking about the budget process for FY24.
The budget process for FY24, the supplemental budget that I referred, that the chairman asked about, is we need appropriation to be able to fund the retroactive payments for this particular agreement. And so I was really responding to a question about how we would appropriate for this WTU contract. But yes, it is for the FY24 budget process that the mayor will submit to the council in March of this year.
And those dollars would not hit until October 1, 2023. Is that right?
Well, we do submit 2 supplemental budgets. This is sort of the chairman asked. So we will submit a supplemental budget just for the WTU contract. We'll often submit a second supplemental budget to reappropriate other funds. And then there's a budget submission for FY24. But all of that takes place in March.
Right.
None of it takes place today.
I see, but it would, the budget process, it would be a budget process for FY23 dollars that you're talking about, not FY24 dollars for the retroactive.
The supplemental budget and the FY24 submission would be the vehicles by which that issue would get resolved. There would be 2 supplemental budgets.
Let me jump in. The supplemental would be FY23 dollars.
That's what I'm.
If I understood the city administrator correctly earlier, those payments would be made either in late May or early June.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. But and that kind of supplemental appropriations process would be the place where it would be most natural to try to address these issues. Maybe it's a parallel document from the one that you submit, but it might be the place for us to address those issues in FY23.
It is all would be dealt with in March when the mayor submits her budget.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Fruman. Councilmember Parker, are you? All right, we'll move on. We'll move back to second round. Chairman Mendelson, you had a couple of questions.
Yeah, although Councilmember Fruman covered this, I wanted to just say a little bit more. Jay Silberman, who used to be a member of the Board of Education, has been active with education issues from time to time, has been pressing this point very hard with regard to former teachers. If I understand, there are about 1,000 teachers who were employed by DCPS for the summer, all of the last 3 years, but are now no longer employed by DCPS. Those teachers, his view is those teachers deserve the back pay bargained for in the current CBA. And that the law has, I think it's the Comprehensive Merit Personnel Act, has a provision in it that says equal pay for equal work, and that leaving them out from the retroactive payments violates the policy behind that equal pay, equal work. Just want to, since we're not allowing anyone else to testify, and Mr. Silberman had asked to testify, I thought I would put that there on the record. My understanding is that the parties were aware of the fact that this CBA does not include former teachers. Do you want to just, can you respond to this issue, Mr. Donahue?
Yes, I think all parties are aware of the applicability of retroactive pay. As I said, it's pretty consistent with other unions, as well as the prior history with the WTU. So it's squarely in line with precedent. The legal issue that you raised, I did ask my general counsel, and we also spoke with the Office of the Attorney General on sort of the question that was raised about the equal pay for equal work. The OIG did certify the appropriateness of what's in this CBA. My general counsel, who's worked in the district for many years, also indicates that the language of the CBA essentially supersedes other existing law. And so if the CBA calls for certain former members to receive retroactive funding, then that's who gets paid retroactive funding. And if it excludes departed members who didn't retire or not deceased, then that's what's reflected in what. Then they would not be reflected in who gets the retroactive funding.
And this CBA is the latter.
I'm sorry, can you?
this CBA, collective bargaining agreement, is the latter, which is that there isn't compensation for the former employees.
That's correct.
My last question has to do with the bargaining the next contract. I'm going to note that the last WTU contract came to the council September 18th, 2017. And it had a fiscal impact of $174.5 million. It had a retroactive provision for fiscal year 2017. The total cost of the contract, because the retroactivity was 1 year, that is 2017, the total cost was $174.5 million. What we have before us, as has been noted before, and that was, by the way, $174.5 million over the financial plan, the 4-year financial plan. As has been noted earlier, the cost of this contract is $346 million over the financial plan. And that's because it is, what, 3 years of retroactive. This is, to put it politely, not helpful to our budgeting process, because it means that just for the DCPS sector of public education, you, all of us have to come up with roughly $350 million. It would be much nicer if it was $175 million, which would be possible if this contract had been negotiated more quickly. I had some discussion about this with Ms. Pogue-Lyons earlier. I'm told that the bargaining is going to begin June 8th. If past is precedent, then we can expect that the next contract will come to us in 4 years with 3 years of retroactivity, which is just not, in my view, fiscally responsible from the standpoint of adopting budgets with easily achievable fiscal impacts. So what assurance can we have that this next contract will be negotiated promptly? It is, either side has the ability, because the law provides this, after so many days of bargaining, to go to mediation, to go to impasse, to force a contract. And frankly, I think it ought to begin sooner than June 8th. So what assurance do we have that the next contract will be timely?
You have our full commitment, my full commitment to enter negotiations with fidelity and urgency. You're right, and I agree that no one wants to be in a position where we're submitting a budget that covers this number of retroactive years. COVID was unique, and there was not any union that did a push for arbitration shortly after their union agreement expired, because they knew that our revenues had not recovered. So I do think there's something unique in the past 4 years that explains why this and a dozen other unions finally got their contracts in the past 9 months, because they saw that our revenues recovered. So they were more confident with their ability to negotiate the wages they believe their members are due. So you have our commitment to enter into that an act of urgency, and we all hope there's not the kind of catastrophic historical experience to our revenues that occurred in 2020 and really lasted for about 2 years.
Now, I realize Mr. Maxwell works for you, so presumably he takes direction from you. And I also realize that Mr. Maxwell is the chief negotiator, or at least his office is the negotiator. And I also recognize Mr. Maxwell as a lawyer, and we always blame the lawyers for anything that isn't right. So, Mr. Maxwell, what are you going to do to ensure that this is going to happen timely? And why can't we begin sooner than June 8th?
Mr. Chair, you absolutely hit the nail on the head earlier in your recitation of the law. Bargaining is open. We can accept any proposal from WTU at any time. The code calls for negotiations to begin, I believe it's 90 to 120 days before the year where the expiration of the contract date occurs. So that would have been this past summer. But because we were still negotiating this deal, we have not yet gotten to it. But I'm committed to working with President Pogline. Her and I have many discussions on an ongoing basis. We're ready to receive their proposals whenever they're ready to give them to us. We're not waiting for anything to negotiate except for proposals.
Except that you, of course, can open negotiations if you prefer.
I don't have any proposals to put on the table at this time. The union has proposals for us, which is typically how it works. The union usually moves first to negotiate and provides us with proposals.
All right, I'll leave it there, but I hope I've conveyed my anxiety that this anxiety is not the right word. My desire, my sense of urgency that this moves forward quickly. Thank you, Chairman Bonds.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson. I want to ask a few questions about this plan negotiations, because I think President Lyon pointed out some areas of concern. Working conditions for teachers, the planning time, class size, technical concerns as it relates to the technology, and then the physical conditions of the schools. So I'm just wondering, as we move forward with a new contract, and here we are in February of 2023, are we thinking that any new proposal from the teachers union would be extensive, that would require a year or two of negotiations? And this is the question to President Lyon.
Thank you, Councilmember Bonds. No, as I said before, we are stayed and focused on the fact that we no longer want to have contracts that are 5 and 3 years behind, especially if we want to get and keep our teachers. Again, we started meeting with our members last week to say, what are those priorities that you have? And we also know that we need to get the support from our parents, our students, and the community to see what they believe would be great learning conditions for their students. And as soon as we pull together what the top priorities are for our teachers, our parents, and our students, we will be the first to deliver those proposals to the city. And again, as somebody who's getting ready to enter their 30th year of teaching, I can't tolerate, and I know my members can't tolerate having a repeat of the past.
I appreciate that, and I feel you, what you're saying. I guess for me, you just put forth in my head, you have said that you're going to take the issues to the parents. You're going to have the parents to respond, and that's going to take some time. And Chairman Mendelson was pressing, like, can't we start before June? It sounds like we probably will not start before June with the negotiations, because having been a parent, you too, we know that parents are going to take some time to jump in and share their opinions. And so I'm just wondering about this process. And it does sound like, as I pointed out earlier, you gave me the figures. I think it was city administrator gave me the figure of 346 million. And now we know that there is a desire amongst many in the city, perhaps, to make sure that the charter sector is somehow compensated. And we're talking about how we get the money, the appropriation process, the supplemental process. So we could very well, in other words, be back to at least 2 years. And we have to make sure that we have the economy that can afford this. So I'm hoping that you can get through a deliberation, negotiation that will move quickly in 1 year span of time. I'm hoping. So Mr. Maxwell, can you start a little earlier? Now that you know some of the issues that are likely to be presented, and you send a correspondence to the teachers union indicating that you want to start the process, and ask them to fill in the blanks, to begin to fill in the blanks.
We'll continue to work with President Lyons to be sure that we move this process as quickly as possible. We're ready, like I said, to move forward. Whenever they're ready to give us some proposals or start talking, we're ready to listen and move appropriately.
And I hear you. I know you're ready, but someone has to initiate, and that's what we're trying to get an understanding that the government or the teachers union is going to initiate more quickly.
We'll be working quickly. There are legal ramifications to us moving first, which is why typically the union moves first. And so, again, we're going to work with President Pogline to be sure we get the proposals as quickly as possible and start working on them. We don't need to have them in total to begin working on them. We can start working on them in piecemeal, but certainly once we get those proposals, we're ready to start working.
Yeah, and that's what I think the chairman's point was, how can we jumpstart this process? And you are now saying that you can actually begin the process, but don't you have to notify the teachers union that you're beginning the process?
Actually, no, the code calls for the party that wants to start negotiations to actually provide written notice 90 to 120 days before the start of the fiscal year where the contract's going to expire. Now, mind you, we just finished this contract, and part of the negotiations was that this contract will end at the end of the current fiscal year. That's something that we worked out in negotiation. So we didn't know before that we were going to have a contract that would end at the end of 23. And so again, we're just waiting for them to move forward, but we're ready to work with Jackie to get these things done.
So several things you're telling us. It's extraordinary circumstances, quite different from the norm. So you are saying that you can begin the process. You will send a notice to the teachers union that you're moving forward, recognizing that the 60-day period before the ending of a contract has already expired. Okay, so you're going to move forward, correct?
We're ready to move forward, but I just want to be sure we're clear. The code is very specific about providing written notice. We've already kind of waived the whole written notice piece because we now know that the contract will expire at the end of this fiscal year. So we're ready. I can't make it any clearer than that. We're ready. The minute we get proposals from WTU, we can move forward and negotiate.
All right, so you could technically, we are going to vote on the contract. Most likely the contract will be signed by the council on the 7th of February. So on the 8th of February, you could actually send a notice to the teachers union indicating that you are ready and prepared. And you're waiting for their proposals, but you already understand that there are some areas that you would want to review. Planning time, class size, technology, physical conditions of the schools, compensation, and what the amount of compensation increase will be. You can do that, correct?
I'm ready to start whenever President Pogline is ready to start. We're ready, but we don't send the notice. The code calls for the union to actually put us on notice that they're ready to negotiate and provide those proposals.
And may I add, Council Member Bonds, that again, our members met last week regarding the bargaining committee. We are going to send out, this is February 1st, we've let them know that we're going to send out a survey to our members, asking them what they like about this contract and what they would like to see in the next contract. And we are going to have a series of town halls with both our members and our parents, students, and community to see what they would, what they think would make great schools for our students. So I'm asking everyone to look forward to that in the coming weeks.
All right, well, I thank you for that response. I just have one question regarding the current contract, which I received late. And that is, what were the changes made in Article 6 related to the grievance process of the CB? And Mr. Maxwell, I'm going to ask you to articulate that.
I'm actually going to ask somebody from DCPS to speak to this who's more familiar with the specifics of the grievance process. I am not.
All right.
Ms. Meister, I think that was an invitation to you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and apologies. I was trying to find the unmute button. So for the Article 6 changes, there were a few of them. First, we added some automatic triggers to move the process along so that we can make sure that the process is taking place timely and resolved through agreement, but quickly, so we can reach resolution for the individual member. We also added mutuality language for scheduling step 2 grievances. And so that is really making sure that the time and place and the notice are mutually agreeable for the parties. And then we thirdly increase the time to identify grievances from 10 to 14 school days. So again, these were all changes made really to facilitate the grievance process and to facilitate resolution, which is important to both parties.
All right, well, thank you very much. I see you now. Okay. All right, thank you very much for that. I want to ask President Lyon, are you aware of these changes to the grievance process that are in Article 6?
Yes, I am. And I want to say I agree with Amy Meister from DCPS that many of the changes that were made to shore up and ensure that the process moves as smoothly as possible. We've had concerns throughout the years of the process of moving grievances through. We went back and forth about what we wanted to see in both 6 and 7 of our contract, and I am happy to report that we are satisfied with the results of 6, because we are hopeful that this will make the process smoother and that we won't have the backlog that we've had over the years.
All right, well, thank you very much. Chairman, do you have anything else you would like to add?
Thank you for asking, but no, I'm fine.
All right, well, thank you all very, very much. I think we have pretty much reached the conclusion of our hearing today, and I want to thank everyone for your participation in our public roundtable. And to the public, if you have any additional thoughts or would like to submit written testimony regarding the legislation, please email it to, I will try to articulate it so you understand, it's admin-labor@dccouncil.gov, and that's EEXECADMIN-labor@dccouncil.gov. And your testimony will be included in the hearing record, which closes on Monday, February the 8th, 2023 at 5 p.m. And I want to thank my colleagues who joined me as well, members of our committee,
Councilmember
Ruben.
Bonds, you said Monday,
Yes.
February 8th. I think you meant Monday, February 6th.
Oh, my goodness. Yes, I do. It does say 8th on here. All right. Thank you very much, Chairman. This concludes today's hearing. With that, the time is now 1 p.m. on on February 1, 2023, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much again to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.